Jeffrey Dahmer, the smile that killed. He wasn't a monster in a mask. He was a quiet man with glasses and a fridge full of horrors. Some monsters don't lurk in the dark. They walk in daylight. They smile at you in elevators. They nod politely in the hallway. They ask how your day was. Jeffrey Dahmer looked normal, but behind his glasses and soft voice, he hid a world that no one could have imagined. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, late 1980s. To his neighbors, Dahmer was just another loner in the Oxford apartments. Quiet, strange maybe, but harmless. He worked the night shift at a local chocolate factory. He didn't play loud music. He didn't cause trouble. He even offered sandwiches to the people who lived on his floor. But what no one knew then was that inside apartment 213, something was rotting, literally. Let's rewind. Dahmer was born May 21st, 1960. His father, Lionel, was a chemist. Bright, logical, emotionally distant. His mother, Joyce, struggled with her mental health. She was prone to panic attacks and heavily medicated. Even during pregnancy, home life was chaotic. The fights were loud. The silences were worse. From early childhood, Jeffrey seemed off. He was distant. He didn't laugh much. He didn't make friends. And yet, nobody really saw the red flags. Or they chose not to. His obsession with dead animals was dismissed as curiosity. He would collect roadkill, store bones in jars, bleach carcasses. At the time, people chalked it up to a boy being a boy. But this was no phase. It was a beginning. By high school, Dahmer was drinking heavily, in class, at home, even before school. His teachers noticed, but nothing was done. He would sit for hours, staring into space. When people spoke to him, he looked through them, not at them. When his parents finally divorced, Jeffrey was left alone in the family home. No supervision, no support, just his thoughts and his urges. That summer, he picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks. They had a few beers, talked for a while. But when Hicks tried to leave, something inside Jeffrey snapped. He didn't want to be abandoned again. And in a moment of panic, he made a choice that would shape the rest of his life. He took Hicks's life. Then he tried to hide the evidence. When police stopped him later that day, they didn't question the garbage bags in the back seat. It was his first, and in his mind, a perfect crime, and he got away with it. For nearly a decade, Dahmer kept his urges buried. He moved from place to place. He joined the army, but was discharged. He lived briefly in Florida. Eventually, he returned to Ohio, and then back to Milwaukee. He took jobs at sandwich shops, blood banks, and finally landed at the Ambrosia chocolate factory. But no matter how far he ran, the thoughts followed him. He tried to resist. At least, that's what he claimed. He even lived with his grandmother for a while, thinking her presence might calm the storm inside him. But it didn't. In fact, it got worse. He began bringing men home. Some of them left. Others never did. It started with altered drinks, then sleep, then silence. His grandmother noticed strange smells. She found knives, mannequin parts, and boxes he'd refused to open. Eventually, she asked him to leave, not because she knew what he was doing, but because something just felt wrong. Once he moved into apartment 213, he no longer had to hide. The pace accelerated. He brought men home almost weekly. He lured them with offers of money, drinks, photography. Some agreed, some hesitated. Most never walked back out. He became methodical. He kept detailed photos. He arranged everything in patterns. He labeled containers. He stored parts in the fridge, the freezer, in drawers, and the smell. Neighbors complained about it often, but Dahmer always had an excuse. The meat had gone bad. The fish tank was leaking. Something had spilled. Nobody pressed harder. In 1991, his world came crashing down, not because of police work or investigation, but because one man escaped. Tracy Edwards. He was supposed to be just another quiet night. Dahmer invited him over, promised some drinks and a movie. But once inside, Tracy noticed something was wrong. There were strange smells, acid containers, and a giant barrel in the corner. Dahmer tried to handcuff him. He pulled a knife. Tracy stayed calm. He played along. He waited for his chance. And when Dahmer's attention slipped, he bolted, out the door, down the street, into the arms of the first police officers he could find. When they entered apartment 213, the officers didn't know what to expect. What they found changed everything. A human head in the fridge, 3 more in the freezer, photographs, dozens of them, showing men in various stages of life and death. Drawers filled with preserved material, a drum full of acid, and a man who didn't resist, who didn't run, who didn't scream, just sat quietly, almost relieved. "I did this," he told them. "You'll find more if you look." And they did. Over the next weeks, the world learned what Jeffrey Dahmer had done. 17 lives, 17 families shattered. The photos, the containers, the drawings. It was the kind of horror people assumed only existed in fiction. But this wasn't fiction. It was real. During his trial, Dahmer didn't plead insanity. He confessed, in detail. He told the court everything. How he planned, how he acted, what he thought. The families of the victims sat in the gallery, some weeping, others filled with rage. One man leapt over the railing, lunging for Dahmer. The court officers stopped him, but the pain was raw. It was everywhere. He was sentenced to life in prison, 16 life terms. But his time behind bars was short. In prison, Dahmer didn't hide. He joked about his crimes. He made sculptures out of his food that resembled human parts. Some inmates avoided him. Others watched in disgust, but not all. Christopher Scarver was one of them. In 1994, Dahmer, Scarver, and another inmate were assigned to clean the prison gym bathroom. The guards left them alone. Minutes later, Scarver emerged, silent. The others lay on the floor. Jeffrey Dahmer was gone. He didn't fight back. He didn't scream. Some say he welcomed it. What made Jeffrey Dahmer different wasn't just what he did. It was how he presented himself while doing it. He wasn't wild. He wasn't loud. He didn't chase his victims through dark alleys. Instead, he created comfort. He lured with trust. He used his quiet nature like camouflage. That's what made him so terrifying. When his case hit the media, the public was stunned not just by the crimes, but by the calmness with which he described them. He wasn't insane in the traditional sense. He was organized, intentional, emotionally disconnected, but not unaware. Psychologists examined him for months. Some called him deeply disordered. Others saw him as emotionally stunted, a man desperate for control, terrified of abandonment, and unable to separate affection from possession. To Dahmer, love meant holding on, even when the other person was no longer alive. His childhood was picked apart by every media outlet. People blamed his parents. Others blamed media. Some blamed alcohol. But nothing explained how the quiet boy who collected insects became the man who kept a skull next to the mustard jar in his fridge. In prison, Dahmer was a puzzle. He received hundreds of letters, some from admirers, some from people begging for answers. He responded to almost none of them, but there was one woman, a religious pen pal, who believed Dahmer had a soul worth saving. And eventually, he agreed to be baptized. Then, one morning in November 1994, that all ended, quietly, permanently. Dahmer's remains were cremated. There's no grave, no marker, but his legacy, dark and difficult, lingers. His story has been turned into shows, books, theories. People still argue about what he was: a predator, a broken man, a product of neglect, or pure evil. Maybe he was all of those things. But the real question is, how many more like him are out there, unnoticed, unchallenged, trusted? Because Dahmer didn't wear a mask. He didn't live in shadows. He lived upstairs. He smiled at the mailman. He offered neighbors food. And behind a locked door, he built a world no one was meant to see. And yet, we saw it. Too late. That's the lesson. It's not just a true crime story. It's a warning.